Hello, good evening, Oral Gibbes, and welcome to Oral Gibbes Live, coming to you live here from World Star Studios at Amsterdam Shopping Center. And with me this evening is leader of the National Alliance, Member of Parliament, Mr. William Marlin. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Good evening, Oral. I'm doing fine, and it's always a pleasure to be here on the program and through the program to communicate with the people of St. Martin.
Well, it's good to have you in the program, and you're the most experienced Member of Parliament, longest serving. You serve in the Parliament of the former Nelson Antilles. You're here in this Parliament now. We've gone through, 4 years of, it's kind of difficult when you look at it because it seems like there's very little leadership coming from Parliament. The people are disappointed, the people are angry, they're frustrated, they're losing confidence in politicians. How you see things now when you look at, you've been in politics for over 20 years, right?
Well, we started off with SPM in 1979, so
That's much more.
It's heading towards 40. Oral, it's no laughing matter. St. Martin is, I wouldn't even say as a serious crossroads. St. Martin is, at a standstill, and it's like you're going up the hill, and the car cuts off, and you have no brakes, and it's rolling back slowly, and eventually going to pick up speed and go down the drain. We've had elections in August. In August, government had to take office in October. They didn't. By the time the government was sworn in, sometime in December, from December to June now, we've had 6 months. We still do not have a full cabinet. The formateur had to present a full cabinet of 7 ministers. They brought 5 and promised the other 2 would come shortly. And every couple of days via the media, you need to find out, if somebody writes something, whether it's on the blogs, whether it's some statement will be made that another minister is being vetted and a possible minister candidate is being vetted. The other thing, when we were in the formation process, the governor gave us 3 weeks. And on the mark 3 weeks, we completed an extensive governing program and action program. The entire document, I think, was something like 180 pages. Okay, within 3 weeks it was finished. We had a team of dedicated people working on it, and it was a program to move St. Martin forward. 6 months after this government being in office, we're still lacking 2 ministers, and we still have no governing program. So there is no sense of direction. There is no leadership. There are those in charge of, those forming part of this whole operation. They may be openly or secretly putting their little things in place for themselves, but the public whom were told that they're ready would expect that the government would have hit the ground running, particularly because it's almost like you did everything possible to be in government, because there was a formation going on, and you broke that up just on the day that the final report had to go in. Ministers were already screened, and now you can't have the ministers. You don't have a governing program. So what are people supposed to expect? What are people supposed to hold the government accountable for? And when you listen to the things that you hear happening in government companies, when you look at some of the developments taking place at the airport in terms of not the operations of the airport, but this entire thing about the building permit or not, to grant the FBO permit or not.
Is that normal for a government company?
Of course not. Listen, you can clearly see that there are powers within or powers that are fighting each other, whether it's government fighting management of government companies, or the supervisory board, like in the case of Gibbes, supervisory board at one end, government at the other end, and management at the other end, rather than There's nothing wrong with there being a difference of opinion about something, but to have blatant, open conflicts and fights among board members versus management, and our government getting involved. One day they come to Parliament and tell you, hey, we are taking a hands-off approach. We don't know. We won't interfere. And then the other day, they're interfering more than anything else. Board members basically sitting on the seat of management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the island is clearly lacking leadership. Leadership on the part of those who are in government. Theo Heiliger, the leader of the UP party, is the leader of the political leader of the country, the political leader of the government. And we have crisis after crisis, and we don't hear from him. We don't hear from him. When the Integrity Chamber discussion started, it's the faction leader of the party who so-called flew in from Colombia on medical leave to come in basically to say he rather die standing than to live on his knees. But what's the stance of the political leader? Is he for or against? We see now the coalition partner, Franz Richardson, in battle with Minister of Justice and the Prime Minister about the protocol that was signed in the Netherlands. And again, no word from the leader of the coalition, the political leader of the country. Where do you stand on this? So that is why one can say, you know, everything is in a disarray. The people are losing confidence. We have the debt of the government to the pension fund and to the other institutions, SZV, I think it is. And these had to be settled before the 2015 budget had been approved. An agreement on a settlement should have been there. We hear that they were going to purchase the government building, or they would give them the government building in exchange for the debt, a part of the debt. That deal didn't go through. So what is the solution? So you can go on and on and on. There is so much that one can say, and if I don't stop now, I can probably go on for an hour without tackling a specific issue.
You know, when you look at it, I've tried to reach MP Theo Heiliger in the last week, and I can't reach him to get his opinion on what's happened lately. And I had the Minister of Justice here last week, and he explained the reasons why he signed that protocol in The Hague. And you, as an experienced member of Parliament, and you are not in the majority in Parliament, what's your position on this? Because some members of the party then that supposedly is the party responsible for that portfolio, the US party, is not in agreement with it so far.
There are two angles to it, or there are two sides to it. One, the content of the protocol itself, and the decision taken by the minister to end the protocol, overstep his responsibility, his authority basically, as minister, and signed an agreement on behalf of the Parliament of St. Martin. Now today, you can take two steps back and say, yeah, but that doesn't take away that from Parliament. Parliament can still go ahead and vote for or vote against. Oral, when we landed in Holland on the Saturday morning, the Saturday night, I think it was, we were made to understand that this protocol was signed and some of the clauses in the protocol. I have not physically seen much of it, gone through it as yet, but for me, what was insulting to the Parliament of St. Martin is that Minister Dennis Richardson, whom I've respected as a governor, I've worked with him. I've worked with him as a constitutional advisor when We were negotiating for country status for St. Martin. He was one of the key people in the discussions and negotiations together with Governor Holliday and others. But in this case, one has to go back to when the discussion started in the Parliament of St. Martin. At that time, Minister Dennis Richardson was vehemently against the Dutch government for their intention to impose higher supervision. It was wrong, and he would fight it tooth and nail. When the whole discussion started about the extra screening and whatnot, there too there were objections. So Dennis fought against the Dutch using authority that they don't have or misusing existing regulations that we have, such as the Kingdom Charter and the St. Martin Constitution, let's say, putting them aside, or the instructions to the governor, etc. What does he do? We are busy handling the draft ordinance in Parliament. We have had our first and second round of questions on the draft. When we had come to the conclusion of the second round, basically, the coalition itself was saying, we are not happy, we would want to see certain changes made. Then you had the faction of the Democratic Party that made several suggestions and say, hey, we think you should include this, include that, change this, change that. The discussion suddenly stops, and the minister goes to Holland now to hold talks with the Dutch minister. And lo and behold, you sign an agreement, power be to him, I have no problem with that, because agreements are signed between governments. But now here on top of the agreement, you are throwing in the draft ordinance that Parliament is supposed to vote on. You and the Dutch minister make one or two changes, whether they're big, small, important or lesser important changes. Fact is, you make changes to it, and then you include that this draft ordinance has to be established by the Parliament of St. Martin by the 31st of May and no later than the 30th of June. And the Parliament of St. Martin can't make any changes unless the Dutch government approves of it. And I'm saying, no, then you are taking away my democracy. You have signed away my democracy. You have told the Dutch government basically that it's okay to sideline the Parliament. Now, you didn't take the decision because the decision is Parliament to take. All he had to do was sign an agreement subject to the approval of the Parliament. But you cannot tell the Parliament they cannot make changes to it. And if they want to make changes, those changes got to be approved by the Dutch government. If you get away with this once, you won't get away with it twice and 3 times and 4 times, then it becomes norm. So here you're claiming that you are trying to make sure that St. Martin was not placed under high supervision. It's not St. Martin was being placed under high supervision. The government of St. Martin was being placed under high supervision. But now what he's done, by his actions, he tried to place the Parliament of St. Martin under high supervision, because you are telling you're agreeing with the Dutch government that this ordinance, as the two of them agreed to, the Parliament of St. Martin will ratify it. And they are given a deadline to ratify it. And if they do not ratify it as is, the Dutch government still have the final say. I'm saying, no, that is a definite no for me. I cannot and will not accept that. No minister has that right to go and sign. Now you can tell me, yeah, but you still can disapprove of it. And I'm saying, yes, that is so, but I hope the minister and the prime minister realizes also that if the majority in Parliament reject this, then they have only one option left. Pack your bags and go home. Pack your bags and go home. You don't need a motion of no confidence as far as I'm concerned. If you want to talk about integrity, if the minister on behalf of the prime minister goes to Holland and negotiates something and then bring it to Parliament, because don't forget when the discussion started, the prime minister said that when they sign on to the formation of this government, there were 2 instructions that were ranked number 1 and number 2. Present a balanced budget, present a balanced draft budget for 2015, and present an ordinance to establish an integrity chamber. Your budget is still hanging in limbo because it doesn't have the final approval yet of the CFT. But here you also, this is your second most important issue. And if you sign an agreement saying the Parliament of St. Maarten will ratify it, and they don't, you should draw your conclusions. That in itself is a motion of no confidence in what you have done. So I hope the minister sees it from that perspective as well. When this discussion started for the first time in the Parliament, and the coalition partners were, like we say, commonly in Middle Region under the tree, started throwing rocks at it, the minister, at the conclusion of that first round of discussion, before answering questions, basically draw his gun in the direction of Parliament and said, you guys make up your mind if you're going to vote for this thing or not. Because if you're not going to vote for it, save my time so I can go home and find better things to do. So again, a minister that behaves as if we don't have a parliament that has the responsibility to establish these ordinances and has as prime responsibility also to supervise the functioning and operations of government. So government can bring any piece of legislation, no matter how great they think it may be. But it is Parliament's right and obligation to question them and to make changes, to propose changes, and ultimately to vote on it. So if they bring a proposal that says, for instance, the Integrity Chamber will have 3 members, and Parliament decides, let's say it will be 5, 4 appointed by St. Maarten and 1 appointed by the Dutch government or the Kingdom government, that is the Parliament of St. Maarten's right. Not the Dutch Parliament, and not the Dutch government, and not the Kingdom government. That is St. Maarten's right. Now, if St. Maarten is acting in violation of the Kingdom Charter, if St. Maarten is acting in violation of its own constitution, if St. Maarten has a problem that it is refusing to address and is failing to address, then if the Dutch government want to call in what they call the guarantee function and impose high supervision because you're neglecting here or you're failing there, if the government of St. Maarten can present a balanced budget year after year after year and is running huge deficits, they say, hey, you guys, if you continue this way, you're going to bankrupt the country and the citizens are going to suffer. But if there's an agreement to establish an integrity chamber and the St. Maarten government is busy doing so, the Dutch government has no right, as far as I'm concerned, to go and give instructions on how it has to be done. And if you don't do it how I say, then you can't establish the ordinance. No, then you're placing the Parliament under high supervision.
MP Marlin, a lot of Dutch politicians have said over the years that St. Maarten politicians are very good at delay, and never getting to the point.
I would not say it's applicable to William Marlin. Or we were in the proverbial desert, knocking about from pillar to post from 2000, and promises being made that we will become country, we'll become country, we'll become country. I became commissioner in 2009. We set out on a course. We negotiated the agreement and pinned down a date, which would have been 10-10-10, and we worked toward realizing it, and it happened. So if Holland is not happy with the speed with which this present government is going about setting up the integrity chamber or dealing with it, then you deal with the government. The Parliament, government brought a draft ordinance to establish an integrity chamber, and that was duly debated, and the ministers were properly questioned. Now, if the ministers are not happy with questions that came from their own coalition partners, that's a horse of a different color. But that is how democracy works as well. If the minister wanted to avoid questions coming from his own coalition partners, then prior to rushing it and bringing it to Parliament because you want to show the Dutch that you're going to pass an integrity an ordinance to establish an integrity chamber before the Dutch government can crack down on you, that's your responsibility. Then you should have met with your coalition partners, whether it's the night before, 2 nights before, whether it's until 12 or 2 o'clock in the morning, to make sure, A, they understand where you're coming from, and B, you take their concerns into consideration. But if you bring it to Parliament without there being any coalition agreement on it, understandably that the very coalition partners who support you're expecting to get will question it. Now, if you are behaving like, I am Minister Almighty, and if we say this is what it should be, then that is what it will be, or else. Then, or else. Then, or else. There is no problem with the minister basically taking on a position of take it or leave it. Because then you're challenging Parliament. And if Parliament then says, no, I am not taking it, and to quote the words of the faction leader of the UP party, Franklin Myers, he rather die on his feet than have to live on his knees. Take it or leave it. So if you're not in agreement and the minister still want to force it down on you, then you reject it. And when it's rejected, the minister and the prime minister would have to draw their conclusion.
So based from your experience and many years in politics, do you think the Parliament of St. Maarten will reject it?
Our faction has 4 members, and I cannot speak for the majority. So rather than going speculating or drawing a gun, I have heard, people criticize things, and when it came to a vote, they walk outside. Okay? Or they criticize something, and when it comes to a vote, they say, well, it's my minister, so I got to take a beam for the team. So I don't know. I don't know. Because the level at which sometimes politics is being played, experience or no experience, one would frown at some of the things that you would see happen. What I'm saying, though, is that the minister wedged himself in between a rock and a hard place, both him and the Prime Minister, now by extension the Council of Ministers, by accepting this agreement as is, where you are telling Parliament you got to take it or leave it, because if you don't agree with it, if the Dutch don't agree with it, we have a problem. Then it's almost like you're challenging, it's like dare me, because you're basically telling me you are taking my authority away from me and giving it to the Dutch government, because if they sign an agreement with the St. Maarten government, not an agreement to govern, an agreement to establish a law, which is my authority. Laws for St. Maarten are established by St. Maarten, not by the Dutch Parliament, not by the Kingdom Parliament. And that's the issue here, I think, that, some may want to shrug their shoulders like, yeah, but we didn't take the authority away from you. Yes, you tried to gamble it away. You tried to give it away behind my back. And I'm saying, no, I will not accept that. I will not accept any minister going, and what I've said also in Holland, unless he had consulted with, let's say, the leader of the coalition, and he guaranteed him, no problem, you have a majority support. There are 1 or 2 who may not vote for it, but I can guarantee you 8 votes. Then maybe that's why the minister behaved the way he behaved and did what he had to do, because he know push come to shove in Parliament, they're going to say one thing on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and when the vote comes down on Thursday, even Thursday morning, they're going to say one thing, and then when the vote comes down on Thursday afternoon, they're going to say, well, for the interest of the country. I'm going to vote this time for. But no, that's not how things are supposed to be done.
Well, I've been hearing that some politicians are so afraid to go to prison that they're going to do anything the Dutch want now.
Well, that is also one of the conspiracy theories that you've heard out there, that, you know, there are those who don't want the integrity chamber because they're afraid that if the integrity chamber comes, they're playing around and sticking their hands in the cookie jar will now come to an end, and therefore their sweet hippie hooray is over. And there are also that theory where we got so much on you that if you don't do what we want you to do, you know we can come after you. I'm saying this is, if these things are, let's say, really true, this is no way, A, for the Dutch to behave, and it's no way, you know, to run a country. St. Maarten, as an autonomous country within the kingdom, we call ourselves not even a toddler. You're still a nursing baby, an infant. You're just going on your 5th birthday in terms of countries. We are not even independent yet. Okay, so if we were an independent country, we would have had even, let's say, more authority as a country, but we are not independent. So that state that we are within the kingdom, it is just 5 years old. Okay, 5 years old. And at least when I was negotiating for us to become country and working around the clock to make sure we put everything in place for us to become country, my promise then and now remains the same. It was for a better St. Maarten for us. We complained and blamed Curaçao and the central government for things. Simplifying our tax system, we blamed it on Curaçao. Doing this, we blamed it on Curaçao, the central government. Give us the authority and when we can do it for ourselves. And what have we seen? What did the people see after 5 years? We are heading now in October, 5 years of country St. Maarten. More governments than anything else. And breaking up of these governments is not over an important, a fundamental issue. It is not because one party is for English as language of instruction and another one say, I'm totally against, and you disagree on that subject. You could never hear what they fall out over. Okay, you can never, they would never tell you really what it is you fall out over. We see all kind of strange moves taking place after the first formation fell through. Individuals that were here on Wednesday were there on Thursday. Those who were very critical on Thursday were over here on Friday. And those who were very critical on the 1st of the month were there on the 15th of the month. So the public is like, what's going on? Okay, what's going on? And every day I keep meeting people call me. Up to the other day, a very outspoken St. Maarten and a strong supporter of the party called me and said, William, I'm not hearing enough of you. And my reaction to him was, yeah, I'm not an entertainer to entertain people and to wake up every morning and criticize and speak out and criticize and speak out and criticize and speak out. Because at the end of the day, you can also criticize the government every morning. But that guy who is hungry, that guy who doesn't have a job, that guy who doesn't get this or that, my criticizing the government every day, at a given moment, you're going to even get angry with me. Because here you criticizing, and what good is it doing for me? And what you see, I think, is more of what you will be see happening. That a young man like Erno York write a letter to the editor and publish it and basically say, this is not what I voted for. Okay, I went against the party I supported. I went against where my family votes. I went against two aunts on this side of the spectrum. And you guys made promises to me and you're not living up to it. This is not what we voted for. One of the candidates who were with the National Alliance in 2010 met my son a few weeks after this whole formation went down. He told my son, he said, "Only, I feel so stupid. You know what Theo got us? Theo got us like 10 green bottles sitting on a wall." Okay? Because here you get people cross from one party to go to another because there supposedly the grass was greener. Now you won 7 seats, you're in government. You go outside of those who you present to the public and say, these are the people who we present to you to govern the country. None of them are offered up as minister. None of them are proposed as minister. You don't see them. So what is it about? So who was really ready? And what were you ready for? These are the questions that the public are asking, and they're praying to God that an election could come sooner than having to wait another 3.5 years, because the public is now ready.
Well, I guess when Parliament meet, I think in a few more days or weeks from now, surrounding that signing of the protocol, we might have the collapse of the government.
I'm not here to advocate it. I'm not here to predict it. I'm saying statements are made by politicians and then retracted. We saw the leader of the U.S. party, Franz Richardson, say that they were going to replace the minister. The minister made a statement, and now his party instructed him to go speak with the minister. So it can very well be that 2 or 3 days from now, you will hear that the leader spoke with the minister and it's all resolved. Okay? Yeah. It's all resolved. There were great speeches in Parliament when the draft was presented, and there were those who wanted to rather become independent, and the time to become independent is now, because we got to get rid of the Dutch interfering in our business. And what you're going to do, support a minister that go to Holland and sell out your right as Parliament and basically sign an agreement and say, I'm going to bring it to Parliament for them to rubber stamp, because they can't make any changes to it. And if they decide to make any changes, I have agreed with Holland that we got to consult with them. That is not Holland's prerogative. Draft ordinances, whether they're presented by Parliament or by the government, ordinances are voted upon and changed, and changes are made to ordinances by the Parliament of St. Maarten. That is their responsibility, not the responsibility of the Dutch government. St. Maarten is lacking experience. If you look at the different political parties, you have Joe Richardson as a former Island Council member and commissioner, and one of the big guns, so to speak, of the Democratic Party in the 1970s. He is in the corner of the UP leadership, let's say as an advisor. Other than that, there are no retired, active seniors who have been around for so many years. We would have had, while it was no abundance of years, but we had Vance James Jr. When I was saying no abundance, I was actually going to refer to Edgar Lynch. While he didn't serve no 20 and 30 years, but Edgar Lynch was a tremendous asset to the party. A bridge builder, somebody who can, who look at solving problems not only within the party, but across the aisle as well. Died so suddenly at the peak of life. The late Vance James. one of our senior politicians, and one that was respected across the aisles as well, wiped off the scene, gone, as they would say, too soon. And, you know, so it leaves, like, for instance, my person as one of the seniors of then, but still active in the arena. And when you look around you, you don't have people who have served or people who have served in government. Our first civil servants were people like Marvin Scott and Louis Douzanson and them. Marvin Scott is deceased. Louis Douzanson is now on pension. But we have very few people we can fall back on in general on St. Martin.
Let me take a call for your MP, Oral Gibbes live on caller. Hello.
Good night
Good night, sir.
to you and your guests.
Good night to you, Doc.
Said it before, and I'm repeating myself again. The person that you have there, parliamentarian William Marlin, is an experienced politician, a seasoned politician. Also, parliamentarian Sylvester Scott Williams. You are able to say this or that about her. She is experienced. And Roy Marlin wasn't doing too bad at all, but they didn't give him a chance. When it comes in question to just talk for talk's sake, oh, let us get all the young politicians there. Nothing is wrong with having young politicians in government. Absolutely not. But they have to learn. And they are not given that encouragement to learn because they're being cut down. But the golden boy, the golden boy have that muscle. For example, he gave a whole lot of big nets, a lot of green watches, a lot of this kind of thing. I think they should have thought, that is to say, you better keep watch. Because the next thing is, you are going to be told, I already give you a watch, and this kind of a nonsense. They are like cattle grazing in a pasture, yes, but with young grass and getting the books. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Doc, good night.
Okay, let's see that caller. Are you there, caller? Hello? Not there, yeah. So, I mean, we always hear people talk about we need young politicians. I agree, but
No,
we also need experienced politicians.
We definitely need young blood, okay? But in general, I'm saying, I'm not talking now about, let's say, those like me who are still active.
Yeah.
But when you look around us, we do not have a history. For instance, we do not have how many former ministers are living on St. Martin? How many former chairpersons of parliament? We never had any. How many people were directors of civil aviation or director of the central bank or director of anything? So we do not have resources. And now that we have, let's say, put St. Martin in place for the people, you need people with experience, experienced people to manage certain institutions. And you look around you, and our human capital, as you would call it, is very scarce.
But MP, a lot of people are complaining that we're bringing people from all over and literally bypassing our own tour. A lot of people are saying that on the road.
You know, I told somebody one day, I said, stop saying things for the sake of saying it, okay? I think for us to have such a conversation, we would have to say, for instance, we needed a head for the Coast Guard. And John Richardson was capable, qualified, and experienced enough to become head, but it went Holland, Suriname, Curacao, Aruba, and bring in Peter, Paul, Mary, or Harry. And then we are speaking more of content. To just make statements all the time, I know there are instances when you would like frown, you would wonder what happened there, or what went wrong there. But we also cannot generalize and think. When we were preparing for Country St. Martin, I was commissioner in 2009, 2010, when we were putting all the institutions in place. Our ombudsman was Mrs. Lynch Ardine, who is still there. Her entire staff, basically, that was appointed at the time, were all locally recruited people. The Council of Advice, Mavis Brooks Salmon, was appointed as the deputy chair because the constitutional chair is the governor. Our own governor, we didn't brought in one from Curacao or from anywhere. Eugene Holiday was appointed our governor. The council, at the Council of Advice, at the audit chamber, and I must say here, Joan de Valemate is doing a tremendous job there as General Secretary. But we had the first chairman was Roland Duncan, and now Mr. Ronald Hallman is the chair. All the board members of these institutions are all St. Martiners or St. Martin residents who've been living here for many years, but basically all St. Martiners. So we have proven at that time, yes, we can build these institutions. And you see what for me is important, Oral? Who is in charge of the Council of Advice? Mavis Brooks. The legal advisors, if we don't have them, we bring them in. But those in charge are the local people. You go by the audit chamber, the general secretary who runs the operation, Joan de Valemate, and the chairman of the board, Ronald Hallman, and before him, Roland Tuitt, locals. If we do not have auditors sufficiently trained, schooled, or qualified here, that we need to bring in auditors to help, but those in charge are local people. And that is how I believe it should be. And we cannot continue to, let's say, sideline our people because they don't have enough experience, for instance.
I have to say this, Marlin, I've always said in this program, your party is a party that makes sure that put people in place from here. Having said that, you look at the government today, and yes, we may not have a lot of experienced people for positions, but here you have the government is telling the private sector, oh, you need to have a counterpart. Well, what about the government now with a counterpart? Yeah, but how come we don't see counterpart or people with these professionals we lacking?
Listen, it's one of the things that I question government on in terms of if government is going to, what is government's counterpart policy? And when explaining some of the things, and they want to say, well, if the person does not have, I think it's Dutch nationality, then they would require a counterpart. You cannot tell me that if we have, for instance, the head of whichever department is from Holland, that we don't need a counterpart for him because he has a Dutch passport, then we are not building this nation for its people. Holland may have 16 million people, but the majority, by far, of the key decision makers are Dutch people. And if you have a Moroccan Dutch or a Surinamese Dutch or even an Antillean Dutchman in a top position or a key position, it's one out of so many. But here, you have too often that government is allowing others to fill positions that are not being occupied by locals. We had a situation when I became Minister of Romi. One of the first things I met was an advice to recruit a Dutchman for one of the vacancies. I spoke to Mr. Brown about it. He said, Mr. Marlin, we can't find nobody locally. There's nobody who, with that profile who we know of and who have applied. A few weeks after, another one came. I told Mr. Brown, I'm not going to sign off on this one until we solve the problem of a young St. Martiner, Mark Williams, who is in Holland and who wants to come back home. Unless Mark Williams is called and negotiated with and picked up where we left off in 2010 with him, as long as you don't do that, I will not sign for not one additional Dutchman to come into the department. Because there is definitely one who is equally or more qualified than many who are coming, has the experience, and wants to come home. And in negotiating, and I don't want to, discuss the person too much, but in negotiating, there were some stumbling blocks, which we were busy resolving when we left government, and I'm happy now to see that he is back home.
Yeah, I'm happy to see him back on the island. Really, that's really good. Let me take a call for you. You're on live call. Hello.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, it has come back to the same big secret that the present government, past government has always said regarding our students. We always claim that we are sending 100+ players away. So much going to Holland, so much going to the United States, Canada, Curacao, staying here. But you never hear how much Pacific, which, and what are they going to study. Tell me you got 15 studying nursing. Tell me you got 15 studying business management. You got 26 going to Holland, studying, name it. You never detail the total what are they going to study away. You give me only the big picture. So after 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you don't know what you got out there.
I fully
I
agree.
don't need names. I don't need their personal business. Tell me you got 15 engineers out there studying. So I know after 5 years, if you can give me 2 engineers out of 16 engineers that you sent away in 4 years, that means you're wasting money. You are totally wasting money.
Okay, let me have
Bring them back.
have the MPNC.
No, I fully agree with him. When I became commissioner for the first time in '94, this is one of the big discussions I had with the department head at the time, Mr. Groeneveld, who is now acting governor. And I told him, I said, Groen, we need to know what we have out there, the return on investment. And I fully agree with the caller, but I would tell him it's even more difficult in the sense that what happens, particularly those that go to the Netherlands, students would leave. So today, we could say farewell, or last year, we could have said farewell to 5 students that gone to study engineering. And a year after, all of them have switched. So when you would say in 2010, 5 students went to study engineering, so by 2015, at least 1 or 2 of them should be completing or rounding off their studies, you would then find out none of them completed it. 5 started off in law, and then you hear they switched. That is one of the other problems that we have. So students, we need to have a tracking system, but keeping up to date. Where are they? It is good to know the return on investment, but also it is good to know who we have out there. So when the time is ripe for us to recruit our people to come back home, that we go after them. No, Oral, the members of parliament have their responsibility. If you're supporting a minister, it doesn't mean you have to support that minister at all cost. If there's a difference of opinion, if there are things, you know, I'm saying it would be a total loss of face if the faction leader of the UP party votes for the ordinance. Because he has made it clear, he said he came back to make it clear that he will not be supporting something like this. And he quoted that he'd rather die standing than he'd rather die standing than to live on his knees. And it is time we vote for independence and we move this country to independence. Now, if you say all of these things and then when the vote comes down, then you're going to say, well, the minister was between a rock and a hard place and the minister didn't have a choice. Then it's like save the people, the rhetoric.
We only have 40 seconds.
So, Oral, I want to thank you for the opportunity. There were so many things that I wanted to speak about. I think the whole situation in government-owned companies, and particularly what we have seen taking place at GEBE now, is one of those other examples where I'm saying, and I just want to get us in to probably start a discussion for next week. The board, in my opinion, should have drawn their conclusion and resign. Because if the board basically tell the managing, not the managing director, the managing president of the managing board, the CEO, that they won't extend his contract and that he has to go home, and the prime minister shoots it down and tell them basically over his dead body he's going to stay, then they should draw their conclusion and leave.
Another time, if you want, you can join me home alone on Thursday night without the suit. I'd love to have you.
Well, I'm back.
All right, I'll have you on Thursday.
So we won't be home alone. We'll be the two of us at home.
All right, good on Thursday. Thanks a lot again. Okay, thanks.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
And
see you
have a
on
good
Thursday.
night for you.
Okay. We'll be back on Thursday. I'll see you tomorrow night with another minister right in Oracle's Live. Good night. Bye.